Welcome to Our Interesting Times with host Timothy Kelly, who interviews today's top alternative and revisionist thinkers.
May you live in interesting times.
Welcome to another episode of Our Interesting Times. My guest today is Julia Tourianski. Julia, how are you doing?
I'm good. How are you?
Very good. Thank you for coming back on the show.
Yeah, it's a pleasure.
Listen, today, I wanted to talk with you primarily about a couple of videos you produced a while back over the month of September and October regarding male and female mating strategies, and kind of carry the conversation on from there. But first, of course, we've had some meaningful events supposedly in the past week. We had this election or selection of Donald Trump as the 45th president of the United States, his upset victory over the anointed Hillary Clinton. Any reflections on this?
Oh man, it's like Brexit number 2. What a surprise! I was so set on Hillary winning, not in terms of want, but just reality. And I was watching the election, and Florida was going red, blue, red, blue, red, blue, and I was like, whatever, I can't handle this anymore. So I went to bed at like 10 p.m. That's really early for me. And I wake up and I take a look just like to see how bad Hillary beat him, and he won. And I was like, it was Christmas morning for me. It really was. I was so glad I went to bed early. I'm like, wow, I got a really big present this morning. And I mean, it's a proper reaction to, these 8 years of very progressive, liberal, dogmatic kind of rule. And not that Obama did anything in terms of policy. Like, he didn't actually do that much of anything good or bad. I mean, the wars continued, but I don't know if I would pin that on Obama himself. I mean, the presidents prior to him did plenty of warmongering as well. But he kind of set up this tone of a progressive takeover and win. So everyone was going in the same direction in terms of social policies and how people should be governed in their personal lives, and the politically correct nature of everything. And it's set us up to comply with these children that voted him in, right? And the minority groups that voted him in, and a lot of women that really did want change, but it turns into like change. The word for change was masked like a word for control, right? Mm-hmm. So all of these leftist groups, at the end of the day, they want the change, but as long as it's changed towards this artificial, perfected society where no one's feelings are hurt and nothing on the surface is done wrong. You can do as much evil, corrupt, vile action as you want, as long as it's under the surface. But on the front, at the front of saving face, you have this mask of, oh yeah, that the gays can get married, and we're going to get rid of racism and blah, 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 like all of these superficial tiny wins for civil liberties that aren't actually wins, because they're done through governance instead of a social, natural evolution. And that's what Obama was representing. And now we have this reaction of a more, well, obviously he's a populist, but in essence, he is right-leaning. And he represents the little people. He really does. You could say Obama represented the little people, but he had the whole bureaucracy behind him, right? He was selected at the Bilderberger. They were in favor of him. Trump came out of the left field. The DNC, helped him out because they thought he'd be an easy candidate to beat. So should thank the DNC. And they propped him up. They beat down Bernie. And they thought Hillary would take him so easily. But this random dude, this populist, won the hearts of the truckers and the waitresses. And to be frank, the white majority of America that was sick to death of being treated like they were not relevant anymore.
Yeah, as 2/3 of the country is irrelevant, apparently.
Yeah, I mean, they want a democracy. They talk about democracy, and then when democracy elects, a president that the people want, everyone's crying and revolting and protesting, having cry-ins. Instead of a sit-in, they're having a cry-in, and they're coloring and playing with Play-Doh. It's just pathetic. This is at Cornell University, by the way. It's pathetic. And, they're making the argument that he didn't win the popular vote. Well, if Hillary won this way, they wouldn't be making that argument.
No,
and I would go as far to say as, well, first of all, I'm glad that the American system is the way that it is, because when you import votes from Mexico, doing a pure popular vote would not be fair. So I'm glad that they have the electoral colleges.
Yeah,
but,
it blunts the demographic warfare that's been going on for several decades. Yeah.
Yes. So it's a good thing. But I would go as far as to argue, and I'm not big. I don't. We can get into this later. I don't believe in a totally unified new world order or huge conspiracy. Or I think things are a lot more chaotic than that. And there's too much. There's too much. Rational self-preservation from even the top of the top, so there is a lot of infighting. There aren't united teams selecting presidents 10 years ahead of time. There are powers that be that fund certain people and push certain people, and the media definitely gets behind a certain candidate because of certain things, but it's not that unified. And we saw this in this election because there was so much conflict and infighting, and they made so many mistakes. And Thank you, opposition, for getting us Trump, because this is your fault. But what I was trying to say was, wait, I went off on a tangent. Yeah. So why aren't the Democrats? Why isn't Hillary asking for a recount? Because it was very, very close. It was very close. Mm-hmm. So why isn't she asking for a recount? Well, because her side had so much voter fraud that if they ask for a recount, they will find the voter fraud on Hillary's side. I believe that Trump won the popular vote too. I think there was so much voter fraud from her administration and from the DNC that they wouldn't even bring up a possibility of a recount because they would be found out if they did. I mean, you don't have to agree with me, but I think it's a plausible hypothesis.
Yeah, you have. I mean, I kind of suspect that in any election, there's a high rate of voter fraud, and it's always a competition of who's better at it at any given election.
Yeah,
that's democracy. That's mass democracy,
right? And even you can count the media slant against Trump as voter fraud as well, because if you're in cahoots with every large media outlet to present lie after lie after lie after lie about Trump and positive after positive after positive about Hillary, that's fraud.
Yeah, and that's what the emails, the WikiLeaks showed, which I believe is a sort of a controlled leak operation that shows that the collusion between the mainstream media and the Clinton campaign with Podesta and those 60 or 70 mainstream journalists, they're having dinner parties with the campaign to coordinate message. Not to mention the patronage that the Clinton campaign received from not just the news media, but the media in general, like Comedy Central and Saturday Night Live.
Oh yeah, it's crazy.
It was so. I mean, I remember the last skit before the election. They actually implied that the FBI and the Ku Klux Klan and Russia were in bed with the Trump campaign.
Yeah, whatever. I mean, you know what's funny? Like, I get really downtrodden. I'm sure you do too, with like this left narrative, and everyone online is, anti-Trump and loves Hillary, blah blah blah. But you look at this, you look at the smart individuals on, like, look at the top YouTubers. Someone like Neistat totally sold out and I think took money and told people to go vote for Hillary and to harass people that don't. But then you look at someone like Jenna Marbles, and she's like, I'm sure she's not Republican. I'm sure she's not. She's, she lives in LA. I don't know what her political views are, but she made these 2 videos, making fun of Hillary. And it's done, with a good spirit, but it's done with this like really highly intellectual perspective, because she must have done her research. She must know exactly what this woman is about as much as you and I know it.
Sorry, was that the one where she like imitates her and she?
Yes.
She tells. Yeah, she's telling people to F off and not to make eye contact with her.
And that's stuff you had to dig for, right? You had to dig in the depths of the internet for that information, because that is how Hillary treats her staff. That is how Hillary treats people around her. And Jenna Marble is like a total popular, funny YouTuber who I would assume is actually more Democratic leaning, considering she's in LA and her age. She's insightful enough to do these hilarious videos, and it's mostly upvotes. People loved it. So, like, to what extent is the media completely lying about how people feel? The only people that are pissed off in America is people in LA and people in New York. That does not represent most of America. So I'm smiling. I'm really happy. And I'm not even a Trump supporter. I mean, I support I support the spirit of what he stands for. The guy's a tyrant. He said some crazy stuff. He alluded to the fact that Snowden should have been executed, or I mean, he's a bit nuts in that regard. But the spirit of what he stands for, opposing this PC culture, opposing this progressive regress of values, I love it. I'm really for it, and we need that balance to Obama. He's the total inverse of Obama. We need it. I don't care if he delivers on a single promise, because Obama didn't either, and I'm not expecting Trump to, but what he stands for and the spirit of this his win shows that the trucker of the South is not forgotten, and they're still the majority of America. And I'm sorry, 20-year-olds at Cornell, get over it. Your parents are still alive, so you're gonna have to put up with it. And hopefully, by the time you're 30, you can harbor some wisdom from the people that have lived, 3 times as long as you have.
Yeah, some sort of respect for the past, and to realize that obviously having some sort of concern for posterity requires a knowledge of the past, that the generations connect with one another. Basically, at any given time, you have 3 generations intersecting with one another. And it's one thing that they've done since the 1950s, at least in this country, is divide those generations through war, through entertainment, music, culture, weaponized culture, and the destruction of the extended family, the creation of the nuclear family. And then
the 3rd generation isn't even existing anymore. No one's having kids.
Yeah, and that's the process. But you're right. I mean, that's what it is. As far as I goes, I wasn't a Trump supporter either, at least to the extent that I went out I'd never put a hat "Make America Great Again." I just want to make America normal again, or if it ever has been normal. I had to know about greatness. Greatness is always that's always a problem for me for nation states. But what he symbolizes and what he represents is, you're right, it's a complete opposite of Obama, a progressive, multiracial candidate. I suppose they call him a black candidate, and now we have another stuffed white shirt in the White House.
I know. I love how they say, they're so unspecific when it comes to race. Like, you're a racist for the smallest transgression, but they can't even be specific about our president's race, and they can't even be specific about, Trayvon Martin's killer's race. Like, they're just so, it's black or white, literally. It's like so offensive.
Yeah, when I heard Trayvon Martin was shot to death by a guy named Zimmerman, I expected like a blonde-haired Aryan German. Turns out,
Mexican guy.
He was a Mexican guy, and whose family actually doesn't live too far away from me.
What? Wow, yeah.
Yeah, but it was, you realize that they're trying to, then when that narrative didn't work, then they tried to spin the narrative.
Well, because it was such a normal narrative, right? Like, okay, first blacks kill the most amount of blacks, then it's Mexicans. Mexicans kill the second amount of blacks.
Yeah.
I mean,
yeah.
I mean, that's not interesting.
No, that's not interesting.
White guy.
It's but again, what it is, again, what he represents. Now, question is, does he now? Obviously, this is electoral politics, nationwide electoral politics, and it's very crude. It's a very blunt instrument, and I don't think we should be too surprised that for what he's promising, that people will be disappointed very soon in the Trump administration. When it gets down to policy, because I think when Trump gets in there, he's going to be surrounded by the Praetorians and the special interests. He's going to find out how much little power the president actually has.
Sure. This is like my point, right? He's not going to probably do that much, and he's already alluded to the fact that the wall was a symbolic gesture.
Mm-hmm.
And funnily, Trudeau, my prime minister, is now one of the first. This is the second thing he's done in office. Is he's making it so that you don't have to have a visitor's visa as a Mexican to come to Canada, so we're going to take them off your hands, I guess. But yeah, I'm just, if I had to just defend my support of Trump with one fact, and it's that he's not going to replace Scalia with an anti-Second Amendment judge. That's it. I'm happy. Second Amendment lives. I'm happy. I'm satisfied. I don't care who's in power.
Yeah,
I mean, that's how bad it's gotten, that I have such low standards.
But again, we have this thing with Trump. I think you alluded to it, that maybe the Trump candidacy and his eventual victory represented a sort of division within the oligarchy, which I think does exist. And I think you're right. I think we don't think of a unified conspiracy, global conspiracy, but we have a series of boardrooms, not one. And
sure,
they do meet, they do coordinate, but they have divisions, like the five families of New York, the crime families. There's divisions and there's squabbles within this group. But I think that this last minute smear of Clinton, which I do think was well deserved, because by the FBI and also the WikiLeaks thing, was evidence of a coup within the deep state against Hillary, who was sort of anointed, and then they decided.
Why did he then say, "Oh no, everything's fine. We checked these 600,000 emails over days
over the weekend."
So what? Then it swung back.
I think what happened was just at the last minute, that meme was created. She's corrupt, and that was enough, perhaps, to swing the election towards Trump. And it got out there, and then I don't understand.
So I wonder if people cared. I wonder, just from a human perspective, did people care? Did the FBI thing make any difference either way? Do you think it did?
I think a lot of what you had was a combination. What I thought was going to happen, you have a low turnout among black voters compared to Obama.
Yeah,
12 and 08. So you had a low turnout, and also her support was so thin, and her support, I think, was wholly created by the media.
Yeah.
And the hardcore Democrats, sort of the generation that supported her. I live in an area where it's a lot of high-income government workers and contractors, and a lot of Hillary signs. But once you get out of the bubble of the D.C., the Northern Virginia area, that you didn't see anything.
Right.
And one of the funniest things, what they created, someone printed these for prison stickers. You could patch over the Hillary for president, and so I saw a bunch of those in these neighborhoods. And so the meme went out there that she was. I'm not corrupt in the sense that every politician is corrupt. The Clintons have a reputation of being gangsters.
Yeah,
we're talking body counts and things like this, and this is outside the fever swamp conspiracy theory. This is real stuff here.
Right.
And,
it's funny. It is. She's like. I think it's even. I mean, sure. That definitely adds to the negative portrayal of Hillary amongst people who are still thinking. But I think it came down to very basic human emotion, because she has reverse charisma. She is not a charismatic person. She's not funny. She's not interesting. She's literally a blank slate. A blank slate for everything that stands today. Well, this is what you have, and this is the personification of that, and what you've had for the past decades. It could have been anybody, and then her only advantage was the vagina, right? Yeah. And she had so much baggage, and that's the best that the that the powers that be that could come up with, yeah, we're going to back her. Well, I guess because she has so many ties to money for them. But I think on an emotional, like I just look at my mom, right? My mom doesn't know anything about these politics, nothing. But just looking at Hillary, she could tell that this person is vile to the core.
Mhm.
She just knew in her heart, I don't want this person to be the president of the United States. While Trump, they had to take everything he said out of context to vilify him at all. Because the guy is charming and funny and charismatic and just a dude. And then the real argument is to be had, like, do we actually want someone like this to lead America? But at the end of the day, I mean, people make comparisons to Reagan, and he was slandered in similar ways, and he wasn't that popular, and he was like a B-list actor. Like people say, "Oh, Trump is a reality TV actor." Yeah, Reagan was a B-list actor. I mean, this is, if anything, the argument can be made that Trump is the most American candidate that we've ever had.
Yeah, well, I mean, they've said that DC politics is Hollywood for ugly people. So I mean, so all these guys are actors. Guys and gals are actors. I mean, that's not that hardly distinguishes Trump. But I think what Trump was, again, you have this, I guess this political neophyte, never held elective office. Now he's president. You think it's always been either someone in the military or someone in politics, and someone like Eisenhower, you could argue, was a political general anyway. So, but yeah, I mean. But I think what happens was, and I've heard some analysis of this. Again, what happened was, I think people within the ruling elite who anoint these who decide for us who we're going to vote for are two choices in every 4 years here in the United States. I'm sure it's true in Canada as well. They decided that Hillary was simply too corrupt to have the system maintain any legitimacy. Right, so what are we going to do? And I think at first Donald was put in there to secure her victory, and like you said, the DNC promoted him, and but then at some the realization occurred. Maybe it was her warmongering, her brinkmanship with Russia, and the fact that there's maybe a faction within this criminal syndicate that runs the world that we need some retrenchment. We need to back down a little bit. It's going too far. The system's becoming unwound, and we need someone. We need a peace candidate. And that's what Trump was. Trump was the peace candidate. Whether we get peace or not, because historically peace candidates have always won, but we've always gotten war. Woodrow Wilson was a peace candidate. FDR was a peace candidate. Lyndon Baines Johnson was a peace candidate. George W. Bush was a peace candidate. He called for in 2000. He called for for less intervention and more, less involvement in the world affairs. Then 2001 magically occurred. That changed everything. But so I think what you're getting here again is, good example. Obama. Somebody used to say that I heard Dr. Joseph Farrell interviewed him recently, and he said that Trump was the mafia candidate of this criminal faction that runs the world, and some of these people in the mafia are very patriotic. And they're getting a little tired of the globalism, perhaps, and also things like Obamacare, which destroyed the disposable income of the marginal middle class, which destroyed the casino industry. And where does Trump come from?
That's interesting.
The casino industry, and so Obamacare has this has doubled and tripled people's premiums and reduced their coverage. And this has taken a big bite out of tourism.
Sure. Things, maybe even the elites don't want to be poor eventually. And I mean, and maybe some of them don't want to be under the rule of Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
I mean, did you see the tweets between Trump and the prince? Yeah. Where he literally told him to go cry in like a pile of his daddy's money, like that he's not having this, he's not gonna be friends with him, and he doesn't care what he thinks. It was good.
And another thing
they backed Hillary. They backed Hillary so much.
Well, they're giving so much money to her foundation. Yeah.
Right. It's just God. That's
this is the one thing that the email scandal that no one's reporting is they reveal that ISIS, this proxy for NATO and Anglo-American NATO forces in the Middle East to destabilize this area and perhaps also to destabilize Europe, is backed by Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states. Of course. And Hillary knew this.
It's backed by Turkey.
A NATO member.
Member. It's insane.
But no one's talking about that part of it. How in this Huma Ahmadine, or the Charlie Danger's estranged wife, Anthony Weiner,
Mm-hmm.
aka Charlie Danger. His estranged wife, her links to the Muslim Brotherhood. Now, I'm not saying there's a Islamic conspiracy taking over the country. What I'm pointing out is how the deep state's convoluted connections to terrorism as proxy force. This goes back to Afghanistan and Operation Cyclone in Afghanistan, and how Al Qaeda and these operations these have always been proxy forces for Western intelligence, NATO, and all that, whether it's to target Russia, or to target Syria, or to target Libya, and these things. So that's not being reported, But that's that might be the true story, that she wasn't so much an agent of these forces. This what someone like what she represents. She's been an aide for Hillary for 20 years. Is she's kind of like an agent that's sort of acting as a go-between between the State Department and outfits that are controlled by the Gulf states and also Saudi Arabia, who are pretty much vassals of Washington and London.
Mm-hmm.
So, but that's not being. But that's
it'll be as deep as you're willing to dig.
Yeah. Yeah. But that also gets into demographic warfare, because we're talking about what's really driving Trump, and we're talking about you talked about this with Cody Wilson,
right?
About the ethno-nationalism, how a lot of
which
libertarians
goes back to the people. It goes back to this Brexit and Trump has reaffirmed my very, very fleeting belief in the people. I really think this time it was really. I mean, there are forces that beat, but at the end of the day, it was, like I keep saying, the trucker in Tennessee that voted because he's sick and tired of the race politics and the taxes and the corruption and the same crap over and over again. And the older people in Brexit, voting to get their country back, the open borders, the insanity, what's going on in their neighborhoods. There are entire neighborhoods in every European country that you can't even walk down as a woman wearing a skirt. Things are getting bad. And these idiots, these stupid kids in their bubbles, and the universities in their big cities where everything's happy and everything's a melting pot, go to a refugee camp. Go there. Go to a Middle Eastern country. And people, I've talked about this with people, and you're Islamophobic. Dude, yeah, I'm Islamophobic. My country borders a country that is Muslim dominated. And I know what they do. And I know the backwards culture that it harbors. And I also know it's not about race, because the smart Muslims left decades ago because they knew what was coming and because they were being prosecuted. They left decades ago. I have a lot of friends from the Middle East, and they left a while back. And all that's left in those places are backwards, Stone Age radicals. And for Trump to point that out and to say, hey, maybe we should screen people before we leave them, let them into our country. Dude, that is the most sane thing anyone could say today. I'd love to talk to these people and just propose, hey, why doesn't Israel have open borders?
Why are they shipping? Why is Israel paying to ship refugees into Europe?
Yeah, why doesn't Israel have open borders?
Yeah,
they're a prosperous country in the Middle East. Well, they should take some refugees.
Yeah. Well, one thing you realize is a lot of the Islamic fundamentals, the backwardness that you cite, is being promoted by the Western powers to destabilize, keep those countries poor and destabilize.
Totally. I mean, yeah. I'm not gonna deny it that everyone has contributed to this, but why are the people who just go to work and come home to their families having to pay for it?
Well, this is the forgotten man that Trump referenced, which is kind of funny.
I don't know war.
Well, I don't know if people understood that was a reference to William Graham Sumner, right? Who wrote an essay called "The Forgotten Man" in the early part of the 20th century, and talking about sometimes the forgotten man is a woman, someone who just goes about, raises his family, doesn't need ask for anyone's help, wants to raise his family, pay his bills, and get along with life, but won't. But it's the progressives that step in and tax him back to the Stone Age. There's a book called The Forgotten Man by Amy Schlage about the Great Depression, the New Deal, and how the Forgotten Man was forgotten in that era with all these alphabet soup agencies and government programs. So in that past election, he not only did he reference America First, he referenced the Forgotten Man, which are these pre 1950 references to some.
So the dude reads.
Either that or someone who hands in the speeches reads.
Well, he's written books too. I mean,
yeah. So
he's not an idiot. Like, it's so easy to lowball him, but he's the president now, so he did better than you.
Well, there is material to make fun of. I don't begrudge.
Sure.
Don't begrudge him that.
And we should. We should respect some leaders to some extent, but I think it's important to ridicule the people that are in office. They're public servants, and they should be under scrutiny, definitely.
But one thing, going back to like the powers that be, this faction within the ruling elite, that perhaps was behind the Trump candidacy, ultimately, was this kind of reflects that there's these are the gangsters that have some sort of patriotic or a feeling or some sort of hesitance about this globalist agenda. And the people that advocate depopulation, they want to the stuff that they've been doing in the third world for decades.
Right.
Good example is your home country, Russia, your mother country. How I've heard some Russians talk about it. My brother's married to a Russian, and how they feel about Putin. And there's sort of a recognition that Putin is former KGB. He's corrupt, but he's our gangster.
Yeah.
He's one of us. He's a nationalist. And this isn't to say there isn't corruption going on there.
Sure. Sure, I know, but that's all. It's a veneer, though. The dude's not a nationalist in the sense of actually caring about his people. He kills his people all the time. He brings policies that bankrupt people every day. He's an evil, evil man. I was talking about this at a gun conference recently, and there is this interesting kind of lean towards Putin, even in America, because of how much of a pussy Obama has been as a president. And it's sad because you shouldn't look to someone, you shouldn't look to the better of the two evils, right? Like Putin is an evil man. If Putin was a real nationalist, our country would be the most powerful nation on earth today. We in terms of resources, we already are, and he's just mismanaged things to such an extent because all he cares about is his cronies and his own wallet. Our country could literally feed the world, literally, and he can't even feed his own people, and people are jumping from their 7-story balconies, holding their children, and crashing to the ground in suicide because they know they can't heat their home this winter. And we have all the natural gas. And I'm not pushing for like social natural gas for everyone. I'm just saying, if he gave a crap about his people, he'd let them own small businesses. He'd get the corruption out. He'd give people, he'd encourage a fertile ground for people to flourish instead of a reverse incentive for people to even work. They're trying to tax people who don't work now. They're trying to do an unemployment tax now. So you're taxed if you're employed. You're taxed if you're unemployed. Good policy. Really good policy, guy. Like, let's not go into this chasm of Putin because I can badmouth him for hours and hours and hours. And I probably should stop if I ever want to go back to my country.
Well, yeah. People forget that he is former KGB. And you're never a former KGB. Just like you're never a former CIA, right?
Definitely.
And just remember, we had George H.W. Bush as president. He was head of the CIA and president. So I think the gangsterism exists on both ends. Now, the question is it a different style of gangsterism that represents a block to the Western NATO aggression that's occurred since the end of the Cold War? That's what people look at. I think you're right. I think because he presents himself as a counterpoise to Western aggression eastwards, that somehow that converts to saying he's a good guy.
Right. That's like the lowest common denominator. Yes, it's cool that he's not part of the New World Order. Whatever you want to call it. It's cool that he's not part of the European globalist agenda. Awesome. Mm-hmm. That's about it. That's all I can say that's positive. Because even that, he's not really doing anything good with it in terms of helping the people in his country.
Yep. But he himself, I think, could be a reaction to what happened in Russia in the 90s, when the West went in there with Harvard, Jeffrey Sachs, and they made this deal with these oligarchs, which were former KGB and military guys, and made them billionaires because they sold off so many resources to the Wall Street and London interest. And because Putin seemed to go in and go after a few of these oligarchs, he came across looking relatively as a good guy. But that's right.
But he's just replaced them with his friends. I mean, it's all like he has no ideals.
But it's cronyism, yeah. So
sure. Just
with now it's just more, I guess you could say, Russian style cronyism as opposed to the Western style cronyism that was established there. But that's a sad history because going back, all the way back to 1917, when Russia was targeted by the West. For destabilization by Wall Street in London with the Bolsheviks who were imported, funded by Wall Street.
Sure, I know. It's so evil.
To make a basket out of Russia because they wanted to prevent Russia from developing normally, which it arguably was, under sort of a moderate, monarchy under the Tsar. But the war came and messed everything up, Well,
all right. Well, now I'm thoroughly depressed. Let's change the subject. I don't like talking about my country. It makes me so this is why I don't. Everyone's like, "Oh, why don't you make videos about Russia and Putin?" I'm like, well, first of all, I'm a citizen still, and I don't want to be denied entry into my country or denied re-entry into Canada if I visit again.
Yeah.
Because they don't have any qualms in terms of prosecuting journalists or bloggers or whoever. So I don't really want to put out a video that totally goes, and it's a kind of an irrational fear. I'm not that big, and there are people that speak out against him that still live in the country. It's hit and miss, right? But I also don't want to do that because, I don't want to run the risk of being too emotionally close to a subject. And I've done that with the Ross Ulbricht case and stuff, and I've had to pull away because of that. Mm-hmm. But with Russia, it's so close to my heart. I can't even imagine making a video I'm sure I could make a huge effort in just being objective and rational. But at the end of the day, I'm so close. My heart is so close to my land. I just don't have, I personally don't ascribe myself enough credibility to do that. Mm-hmm. And it's too painful for me to even bother. I'd rather just keep it to discussions within my own family and quick little explorations like on this show. Mm-hmm. So, and if people can understand that, that'd be nice. But
certainly,
yeah.
Now, you also have you devoted some time to this very disturbing case, the Ross Ulbricht case in the Silk Road.
Sure, yeah. There's going to be the Ross-a-thon tomorrow, actually, so raising some money for him.
And I know you've interviewed his mother.
Sure. Yeah.
And I've seen several interviews with her. She's also Tragedy and Hope has done a lot of work with her regarding this case. And this is a very upsetting case. The Silk he ran, I guess. Well, let you explain it. How was he set up, and why do you think he was set up?
Oh well, they just wanted to close the case, so they just wanted to throw someone in jail and just put a cross on it, right? And that's what they did. But this is the Ross Ulbricht thing. That's a whole entire show. I don't know if you want to open that can of worms, but if people are interested, if you go to my blog section on bravetheworld.com, and you can just search Silk Road or Ross, and I put all the videos in one place, and you can, if you're really interested in case law and case studies or just this specific instance. You can watch all the videos, and I did an update on the appeal process. So that'll give you a very good rundown. It's very interesting.
They gave him life in prison?
Double life.
And he never harmed anybody did he steal anyone's property?
Yeah, it was never proven that he actually harmed anybody. And he got a longer sentence than, what's that guy? Charles Manson.
Mm-hmm. Who, by the way, never killed anybody, apparently. No, but that's a whole other story. It's kind of a funny comparison. But yeah, they called him a kingpin, and then they because well, like you said, I think what I think would happen was this Silk Road. They like to manage the drug trade and control it, and this was a peer-to-peer operation where they really couldn't control. And putting him in prison is like putting, I don't know, putting whoever owns Craigslist in jail, or putting the guy who runs Facebook in jail for things that go on. It was just a platform.
And it's funny because his platform had a moral guideline and moral rules and virtue and decency, and they shut it down, and now there's 20 other Silk Roads that sell child porn. So good job, guys. Good job, government.
But those are probably managed or controlled. So
I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. But, they're pretty spontaneous.
But the whole thing about this thing is, again, at least what I think is, the case is just how they can easily bankrupt a family and render them pretty much defenseless in a courtroom, because they have all the money in the world. The prosecution has all the money in the world to throw at a case.
Sure. I always wondered why the system is like why can't they put a cap? Like, if the government is suing someone, why can't the government allocate a specific cap of resources to them so that they actually have to balance their books and, work within the confines that are representative of the regular person? Instead, they can go on indefinitely with indefinite money. That's not fair at all. I don't understand why the system was designed in such a poor manner.
Because the government represents the people, Julia.
Oh God!
It's the people. It's the people versus that, right? They always say the people versus
right.
But we all know that's a fantasy. And the reality is, just as a general rule, is in America, I'm sure it's true in many other countries, but particularly in America, I'm more familiar with in the United States, is effectively the forgotten guy, the little guy, has no real access to the courts because it's cost prohibitive. So this is why you have a 95% conviction rate, 95% which are just they plea it out when there's no, and then there's the court tax, where if you decide to fight the charge, the government will throw more charges at you, and threaten to put you in jail for longer if you decide to vindicate yourself in court, which is, to me, is a complete abuse of power.
Sure.
You know. So that's the takeaway from that. I mean, that's how this little guy can be crushed, and that's, like you said, first Ross, and then it's going to be you. If they don't fight it. So anyway, perhaps a more cheerful, more less disturbing topic would be these couple of videos you made, which I think are very useful, regarding male and female mating strategies and why they differ.
So controversial. Men and women are different. Wow.
Strange enough, it is controversial, right?
Wow, there is no point for a woman to sleep with 100 men. Wow. There's no biological premise for women to have multiple mates. Wow. No, it's very risky stuff, man. Very risky stuff. But start me off. It's such a big topic.
Well, I invite people to watch the videos. They're short. I mean, I think they're 18, 20 minutes respectively.
I think one is even 13 or something.
Okay, 13, 18. Yeah. And of course, you watched the one we talked about in our previous discussion was the 50 differences between men and women, and you watched that. And you watched these two, and I think what's important is that you understand why this is, and so there's a biological basis for how men and women behave, which if we understood that, might
soften our interactions.
Yeah, and also avoid a lot of nonsense, a waste of time and energy, and a lot of ruined lives in the process.
Sure.
A lot of this, I would say, common sense, recognition of these differences and how they're represented in society, and whether in tradition or convention or even law. There's been a war on nature, and I don't think it's some sort of general confusion. It's just sort of linear development out of society, and maybe good example was feminism a creation of post-war economic prosperity and leisure time, or was it more of an example of weaponized anthropology? And I do think the evidence suggests the latter, because we have the influence of the foundations, the intelligence agencies promoting this theme or meme in art, in entertainment, in music. And so it's important that the importance of your videos is that it points out that this is a reality, and if you ignore it, you ignore reality at your peril.
Definitely.
So,
and it's funny, like you bring up nature, and a lot of these kinds of people would argue, oh, religion has been oppressive to, like, I'm talking about Western religion, right? Christianity has been oppressive to women, and the gender roles and sexist and blah blah blah. But religion, especially Christianity, actually parallels nature to a big degree. And the way that the concept of a woman is not that different in Christianity than as evolution has presented it to be.
mm-hmm.
So that's fascinating to me, because, old wisdom, it's survived decades and decades and decades, thousands of years, and it's global. A lot of these religions have so much overlap, and at the end of the day, it's because they're kind of drawn from natural understandings of the world. Even like very pagan religions, or Native Americans and the Inuit and Eskimos, their stories and their ideas of the male and female across, they all parallel, and they've never met each other. They're so far away. They live completely different lives. They live in different environments, and still somehow globally, women stay at home and cook, and men go out and hunt. I mean, this isn't oppression. This is nature.
Yes. That is, it's funny how these things they spread across the cultures that never really met each other. I was listening to, what was his name? Peterson, the professor up
Jordan
Canada.
Peterson.
Yeah.
Oh God, I love him. I'm obsessed with him. I'm supporting him on Patreon right now. You get a signed copy of his book and this course for free that you can take. Guys, highly recommended. Dude's a genius, highly overlooked. And I'm sorry, but I'm so glad this has happened to him. So for you guys who don't know, Jordan Peterson he was a prof at Harvard. He's been a prof at the University of Toronto for a long time. He's a 10-year, I believe. And he made he puts his lectures online. So he has a YouTube channel, like nobody really knew about it until now. But it's high quality content. And he put out a series of videos talking about the new bill. I think it's called the B18 or B16 bill in Canada, which creates which basically puts misgendering someone under hate crimes. So it puts under law what language you have to use. It doesn't prohibit language like it does. Like I know some places like you can't say the N-word, and like you can't call someone a fag, or else it's a hate crime. But this is actually writing into law the language that you have to use towards somebody, whether you know that they identify that way or not. And it's not just one or two differences. It's like 30 different pronouns that you somehow magically need to be aware of. So he was talking about how this is totalitarian, how this is against freedom of speech, how this is completely wrong, and the wrong step in the wrong direction. And all these leftists are like, no, it's just so transgenders don't kill themselves when you misgender them. Well, like, it's not a problem. If you're transgender and you have a prof and you build a rapport with him, he's not going to misgender you just to make you upset. Now, when you start making demands like you need to be called Z, even though you're transitioning to a woman because of some arbitrary, dogmatic view of the world, the left dogma where everybody has the right to feel good all the time. That he basically, he's just saying, you can't force me to use a certain kind of language. If I have rapport with someone, I'm not going to misgender them. But you want to legislate the language I'm allowed to use? No. So now he's a hate criminal, he's a bigot, he's racist, he's transphobic, and these people just attack him. But he has obliterated them in every debate. And everything that I've seen on the Canadian television, even the pundits aren't against him. Like, you can tell, they're trying to be objective, but you can tell they're not swayed towards the left, which is a big deal in Canada. Like, Canada has been like occupied by the left way longer than America has. And it's amazing. And so like, they did this one interview where he was on TVO, and this other professor at U of T starts off with saying, the concept of two genders is false, and I could go on and tell you why, but I'm not going to because we don't have that much time, but it's false. It's not true. And like, he just makes like this claim, this completely unsubstantiated claim, and Jordan Peterson just destroys him in this interview, and it's amazing. He's become a meme now. Dude's amazing. Check him out. Yeah, that was my spiel. Go Jordan.
Yeah, this sort of you have to this idea that if you use a certain pronoun that's based on the person's sex, what they're born with, that's something you're oppressing that person. This is the separation of language from reality.
Sure, and one of the other panelists on that discussion was like this. A woman. Not biologically, it was a woman. She identifies as a man, but she hasn't identified long enough with being male, so she still prefers the pronoun they because she's not quite there in the masculine mindset. And I'm just like, oh my God, all right, fine. You have issues. You have lifelong issues. I don't care whether they're real or not, but like, how am I supposed to keep up with this? If I meet you at a bar and we have a conversation, you explain this to me, I'm not going to go out of my way and call you a she just to piss you off. I'm not going to do it. But why are you trying to legislate your indecision on regular people?
Well, this is narcissism on stilts.
Yeah, you're right. It's
just insane.
That's the simplest explanation, and that's usually the right one.
I mean, that's just. I mean, I think I was listening to a talk that Jordan Peterson had with, I think, by the person that goes by the name Roaming Millennial. I think it was a link that you had. I saw on your website, and it was like a 45-minute, really good conversation that they had. And she brought up she was playing devil's advocate. She was saying, just out of courtesy, what if you were to someone who is a male who identifies as a female, that you would use a female pronoun just to accommodate them. And he's sort of exasperated and goes, listen, I live on a planet with 7 billion other people, most of whom I'm not familiar with. You're going to have to default to some sort of generalized language to communicate. This is insane. This is absolutely insane. And I do think what's behind this isn't some sort of they're exploiting a sense of compassion, but it's being weaponized. The language is being weaponized to destroy any sense of reality. And the most basic reality of our existence is male, female. And
do you know how fast we make that distinction in our minds?
Real fast.
It's 1/3 of a millisecond.
Yes.
We gender someone in one. How are you going to rewire our brains, leftists? How are you going to do it? Are you going to make thinking, misgendering you through thought a crime? Yeah. I mean, you know what's going to happen? No one's going to want to talk to these people anymore. Because right now, if this bill passes, if I see someone who's kind of androgynous, I'm not going to freaking talk to you.
It's a nightmare.
I don't want to be sent to jail for a hate crime. Bye-bye. I'm not making eye contact with you. I'm not speaking to you because I don't want to be thrown in jail for a hate crime.
Nor will I ever hire you because you're too much of a litigation risk.
No way. It's just crazy. And they've created this environment that is actually discriminating against them more because they're coming off as complete CUNTS.
Okay? No, who this...
They are. It's awful. And they don't even represent the majority because the majority of transgender people they just want to transition and like be left to participate in society without any of this drama. And that's how they used to be. You know what? If a guy who became a woman walks into a female bathroom and they got heels on and they have a wig on or they have long hair, I'm not going to even notice that they used to be a man. What is the issue?
Nobody knows.
What is the issue? Like
just like if a homosexual was teaching somewhere and was had discretion in his lifestyle and respected people's privacy, had a sense of propriety, guess what? It's not an issue. It's when you become an activist, it becomes an issue. When you're shoving people's face, it becomes an issue. And that's what most people have a live and let live attitude about these things. But when you become a cultural aggressor in these things and you promote these things and you infiltrate institutions like education institutions or religious institutions to promote a certain agenda, that's when you get the kickback, and that's what people are going to experience.
So go cry in your little circle, in your kumbaya circle about Trump being elected and a step towards what you say fascism. And maybe you're right. Maybe he is a step towards fascism. Maybe. But guess where that fascism is coming from? It's a reaction to these psychotic left-wing destroyers of objective reality. And people are going to resort to the opposite side because it's really hard to stay nuanced and relevant and considerate in a environment where all eyes are on the victim, or like the perceived victim. Like, you're not gonna, if the most of the population doesn't feel like a world that they live in is relevant to them anymore, because all relevance has been hijacked by a small leftist minority, they're going to revolt in a way that is a step towards fascism. And you can see that all throughout history.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I think a lot of this legislation, it vindicates the original critics of the so-called civil rights agenda of the '60s, because when this positive legislation was passed, the notion that you could outlaw racial discrimination, and the only problem with that was here in the United States was, I think it was Hubert Humphrey, when the bill was being debated in 1964, someone pointed out by reading the law. This is when congressmen and senators actually read laws they were voting on. Pointed out to them and said, if by the language of legislation, this could be inferred to promote quotas and reverse discrimination. And he said, if this bill that bans discrimination in employment and housing stuff is ever used to promote quotas, I'll eat it. Well, within a few years, he should have been eating it, because what happened was the courts and the various agencies that were entrusted with enforcing said law immediately resorted to statistical disparity to prove discrimination. It became a prima facie case of discrimination when there was a statistical disparity in education, in employment. This disregards the natural differences between ethnic groups or between races, and the fact that even if you were to outlaw discrimination, if you're going to outlaw Jim Crow and do away with discriminatory policies, racial policies, there'd be several decades of catch-up. And not to mention the fact that, as Thomas Sowell has written about in his studies of ethnic groups, is there are differences between the ethnic groups that are going to be reflected in income and what professions they choose and how they approach education. And these differences aren't necessarily bad. They're a good thing in the final analysis. I don't care if there aren't that many Chinese or Jewish basketball players in National Basketball Association.
Yeah, and they don't care either, because they make 6 income figures comparative to whites, blacks, and Mexicans.
Yeah, so
like Asians and Jews are doing real well.
Yeah.
So I mean, but like nobody talks about their privilege.
Yeah. So it's one of these things where when you try to equalize, a good example is the notion that you could simply pass a law against discrimination and make people be nice to one another.
Yeah, no, it's crazy. Well, one of these people yelling at Jordan Peterson at they ambushed him basically at some bus stop near the university, and he I don't know was yelling at him how she got denied housing because she's transgender, because there is no law against it in Canada. And I'm like, dude, after watching this video, you got denied housing because you're a uncooperative, psychotic piece of crap human being. I would never give you housing ever if this is the way that you interact with respectable, educated people around you. You did not get denied housing because you're trans. You got denied housing because you're a bad person. And you're the exact kind of trans person that would move into a house, and then any comment that you would get from your landlord, you would sue them for for discrimination or a hate crime.
And also, where was she trying to rent? Was it a house? Was it a room in a basement in someone's house? Or was it a 500?
She wouldn't answer the question, so I assume it was on a private market, not like a public housing.
Yeah.
Right? It wasn't from the university or from the government. It was a private individual that probably chose someone who was a better fit for the apartment, i.e., not a piece of shit human.
Well, let's extend this line of thinking. What if I were to meet a girl, okay, and say she doesn't want to marry me, she's discriminating against me because I'm the wrong race? Can I sue her?
Right. Oh my God.
Right?
Are we looking into the future?
Remember President Sarkozy, the president of France, who said that he wanted more interracial marrying in France?
He said that?
And he suggested that the law should be used to promote it.
Oh my goodness. So I didn't know about that.
I mean, this is insane. I mean, most people most people are
So,
attracted to people who are like them. Now, there are people who like it different, so who cares? I mean, I'm not. I
well,
don't
you know,
really,
there's like a whole meme and the pro-Trumpers talking about white genocide. Like, there's so many Twitter accounts talking about how there is an active push towards white genocide through integration and intermarriage because biologically, we have a recessive gene.
well,
So you marry, and that's obvious. You have a Asian wife, your kids look Asian. You have a black husband, your kids look black. Like
yeah.
in terms of that. But so this is what I'm talking about, the extreme opposition. You deny differences between race and gender, while the alt-right is going to push it to its ends and talk about white genocide through intermarriage and promote intermarriage tendency, sentiments. So you're going to get this pushback if you're going to be so insane and say things like there's no difference. Everyone should coexist and be, some sort of like yellowy brown color.
And ethnic groups have a right. I mean, again,
The Jews don't intermarry, and
no,
they've survived some crazy crap.
Yeah.
I mean, the Jews have survived some of the worst prosecution in the history of the human race. I think part of it is because of their strong community, and not most of them aren't even that religious anymore, but they have this strong sense of community. They don't intermarry, and they have old wisdom values.
But they don't extend that right to other groups.
Oh yeah, of course.
That's the it's the ADL motto is diversity is our strength. What that means is diversity is their strength. If you want to destroy the host culture or weaken it and destroy the idea of ethnic identity, the point is the whole idea. You just hear it in the States, and also when you talk about whiteness, that's kind of a bland term. White people are very diverse. I mean, there's people with red hair, blonde hair, black hair, blue eyes, brown eyes.
I'm a Slav. I'm Eastern European.
Yeah.
Calling me white, like I can choose to be offended at that.
Yeah, because it denies the ethnic.
I have nothing to do with Irish people or the Nords. Like it's just so stupid. Oh my
But
goodness.
it's one of those things. But the idea is that the ethnic groups, there was a time we had ethnic neighborhoods in this country, and they were actually purposely broken up for social engineering purposes.
And the black neighborhoods had a lower divorce rate than white people did.
Mm-hmm.
That's how black people were. They still are to some extent. Black people were very Christian, very family values, very structured, and proud of being black, and even ethno-nationalistic. Definitely. And then, here comes the CAA and the brainwashing, and they broke them up. Mm-hmm. And I don't think there's anything wrong with having black power. There's nothing wrong with preaching. You are a group, and it's okay to preach superiority within your ethnic group because it builds the communities. I'm not saying it's good to extend it to violence or some sort of action, but it's good to be proud of your ethnicity and your background. And that's how blacks used to live. They had their own neighborhoods, they had everything, they had their culture, and now it's been destroyed. And now there's no dads anymore. All the dads are in jail, or just they ditch all this. I talk about this in the male mating strategies. Mm-hmm. This happens they made them, and the neighborhoods, it's not always necessarily low income, because black neighborhoods were always low income. They didn't really have a strong footing in America ever in terms of economics. But why they're not getting divorced? They have this strong sense of community. They have these churches they go to. They help each other out. They weren't dependent on welfare systems because they had each other. And as soon as the CA came in and the drugs and the welfare system, their neighborhoods have been massacred, and they don't have respect for themselves anymore because they're killing each other. And I'm sure they're not the only people we've done that to. I mean, you can look at parts of Africa, what the Europeans did there. I mean, this is like an endless example conversation, right? Mm-hmm. My point here is when you have this kind of leftist, everyone's the same, no one's different. You don't need to interact with people that are like you with similar values because that's all subjective anyways. Blah 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 blah. It destroys people.
Yes, here's a particular case. Are you familiar with the in the 1970s this phenomena of blaxploitation films?
Mm-mm.
Well, there's a series of films in the early 70s with starring Oh, it's like Superfly and Shaft, and it's about
Okay.
and well, it turns out these movies, we used to watch things, and they even think with Blackenstein and Blackula, these things.
Okay.
So these B movies. Well, what it promoted a certain violent, sexual, permissive culture, and they targeted the black community. And this wasn't just an example of Hollywood picking up on a trend and making money off it. This was a CIA operation. Gordon Parks directed these films. He was a Time Life. Time Life was always CIA, by the way. Henry Luce and all that. And he worked for C.D. Jackson, who was CIA. And it worked with Jim Aubrey, who was the studio head over there with MGM. And they produced these films in the late 60s and early 70s to promote, pimps, drugs, and sex, that culture. This is also this wasn't just an example of how the black community was I think targeted culturally through entertainment. You also have the similar thing occurring a decade before in the 1950s with Time Life and Life magazine promoting psychedelic drugs with Gordon Wasson, and this was promoted. But we touched on feminism. Gloria Steinem, of course, CIA. Her magazine, Ms. Magazine, which was a CIA publication, published an article in 1978 called "Black Macho and the Myth of the Superman." And it was an article supposedly written by Michelle Wallace, but it was really probably ghostwritten by somebody else. And this promoted this idea of how dangerous the black male is and how bad male authority is in the black community.
Wow.
So this is how,
it's so heartbreaking, man.
Yeah.
Like, how does a people who have almost no divorce and such strong cultural pride in one generation?
Meltdown, yeah.
Total meltdown.
Because they were economically marginal. I think the middle class, the white middle class, first had to be created. They were targeted a decade later with pop culture to weaken the family, the sexual revolution, these things. But yeah, again, that's an example. Now, if you've heard of Daryl Hamamoto, he wrote a book called "Servitors of Empire." He's talking about the Asians. He thinks he's a teacher out of Berkeley. He's one of these gadfly professors. You probably like him. But he's talking about how Asians were targeted, and they serve a certain function in the New World Order. They're set to be the professional class who administer the vaccines, the Rockefeller medicine, the sort of scientific approach to things. But he says in his book, he cites a few sociologists who studied the effects of the on the Japanese families who were interred during World War II, and how that internment affected and weakened these families. And the notes were taken, and they were applied to the black family in the introduction of the Great Society in the early 60s. So it's very scientific what they did.
Yeah, they hit all the marks, like even so in my male mating strategy video I talk about why there's single moms, right? Why, especially, in low economic neighborhoods, especially with blacks, single mothers are so prevalent. There's more of them than married mothers, right?
Oh yeah.
And it's like, the men's movements like to say, oh yeah, because the women just want the money from the state, blah blah blah, which is a very simplistic view, and it misses the point entirely. Because if you're poor, if you're from a low socioeconomic area, let's say you're working at McDonald's or you're a cleaning lady or something, getting pregnant without a man reduces your standard of living. It reduces it. You might not have to clean houses for a few years now, but the amount you're getting paid is not substantial enough to improve your standard of living. Also considering the fact that you have a baby to take care of now 24/7. So you have reduced leisure time, reduced freedom, reduced ability to work, and yes, you're living on the dole, but you're not really living. You know what I mean? It's not an incentive. It really is not an incentive. So when you're talking about the low economic groups that are single mothers, that is the majority of single mothers. So let's stick to the main demographic. What I think is really happening here is a complete change in incentive structure when it comes to mating strategy. So men have several mating strategies, And so one is lifelong monogamy. Because with that, your child's survival rate is high. And you harbor the woman to your environment, and you keep she's around you a lot because you're married. So you are more sure that your offspring that you're investing in are yours. So that's one mating strategy. Another one is polygyny. And then there is types of promiscuity. So for men who choose to be promiscuous, and that's a legitimate mating strategy, it's usually men for whom a monogamous mating strategy makes no sense because they can't provide the resources necessary to keep a woman around and to keep their children alive, or like to improve their survival rate. So they choose the numbers game. They spread their seed, and some of the kids will probably survive, and some of them may even be successful. And put it more into context, before the welfare state, or even before this kind of high standard of living society that we have. So let's go to like the 1700s. Okay, if a man knocked up a woman and didn't marry her, it was almost guaranteed, unless she had a wealthy family to back her up, which isn't most of the majority in the 1700s. She would be starving. She would have no place to live. The kid is likely to die of a result of exposure and disease. She is left to fend for herself completely. So most men, being somewhat moral creatures like most people are, would marry the woman and build a home and take care of their child. That's what happened. Now, because of welfare and our high standard of living and the complete breakdown of any moral institutions like marriage and any accountability in our society, men will just ditch because they know that their kid will survive. They know their kid will not die. And so why not adopt a numbers game mating strategy? And if you're poor enough, you can't be forced to pay. These guys are not paying child support. They are not paying child support. How can you make a guy pay child support if he doesn't work?
Mm-hmm.
So the whole point I'm trying to make is when you take accountability away from both parents, then you're not going to have any united you won't have any coupling. You won't have it because the men will adopt a promiscuous mating strategy. Why should they focus on one woman and 2 kids when they can have 7 kids with several women and not have any obligation to any of them?
Yeah, and there's no moral sanction or pressure put
yeah,
on the
it's
person.
so normalized. It's so normalized in Black neighborhoods that it's weird that if you do have a dad.
Well,
And I'm
whole...
I'm not trying to be just specific to that neighborhood. That's just a good example. But like even in I'm middle class, and looking around to my friends as I was growing up, I was the exception. My parents were not divorced. I was the exception, and we weren't even that poor.
Yeah, that's something sinister, and that wasn't just something that just happened. I think that was promoted, and I think the evidence backs that up. There is I do think what ultimately this is a form of indirect population control, because if people don't marry, they don't have kids, they have weaker families. It's also promoting certain deviant lifestyles who are also, I think, ultimately...
But I think that backfired because the single moms are having plenty of kids. They're having plenty of abortion and plenty of kids.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the married couples who aren't having that many kids, to be honest. A lot of people that are getting married at like 40 and never producing any offspring.
Yeah. Well, a lot of the things... I had some guy talk to said in China there's this official 1-child policy, where in the United States we have an unofficial 2-child policy.
Yeah, exactly.
The combination of economic pressure, mores, and values that are promoted by Madison Avenue, Hollywood. People put a limit on these things, and
and the lie that you need money to raise kids. You don't need money to raise kids.
That's the best form. But Julie, that's the best form of control right there. It's far more effective. You
need a husband to raise kids. That's it. You need a husband. That's it.
But if you promote a material lifestyle and expectation,
and everyone's been touched by that. People are so convoluted in their thinking. So convoluted.
Yeah. But there was in 1969, and this is what's very chilling because it shows just how well planned out this was. There was a Planned Parenthood meeting that was held in Pennsylvania, and basically it talked about it was Dr. Richard Day, the National Medical Director of the Rockefeller-sponsored Planned Parenthood, had a meeting of the Pittsburgh Pediatric Society, and the topic of the meeting was a new world system that was supposed to be promoted, and basically what it called for, if I get my notes here right. Now, Dr. Day said this is what the agenda was, that they were going to basically promote homosexuality, promote single parenthood for the purposes of reducing this is sort of a soft kill approach to the population question. Dr. Day said sex will be separated from marriage and reproduction, i.e. sexual liberation, to break up the family and reduce population. Abortion, divorce, homosexuality will be made socially acceptable. Homosexuals will be given permission to act out. This is like the Stonewall riots. This is all promoted by the media. Gradual promotion in the media we reached today. It would be laws would be changed to make it so difficult for families to stay together. Promote women working outside the home. People would remain single longer. Sports would be promoted among girls, to I guess masculize them, and demasculate the men. Now I'm not sure if all this is played out as perfectly, but generally this is what we've seen unfold. Another thing is sex will be promoted even among the elderly, i.e. Viagra, to sexualize society, mass immigration, and unemployment to change society. And this was all planned out, or at least this agenda was laid out in 1969. I do think that there's been an attempt to sexualize the youth with entertainment and media, use crisis. I think the AIDS crisis was largely, at least was exploited to teach sex among kids, sexual education. In fact, there is a 1989, the National Research Council promoted a document is AIDS, sexual and intravenous drug use in the United States, and it said pretty much laid out that the AIDS crisis would be used as a pretext to sexualize kids and adolescents and promote education programs that would otherwise be opposed by parents. But this crisis gave us an excuse to do this.
Oh yeah, they like to exploit the worst things, don't they?
So this stuff. I mean, again, if you're thinking this is a conspiracy, I think you're largely correct, because all a conspiracy really is two or more people meeting in secret to plan out something either nefarious or immoral or illegal. And if it's not illegal, it's definitely immoral and nefarious. What they were planning to do with society by weaponizing the culture. And if you look at what comes out of Hollywood, the music and these things are all directed at the youth. And there's observation that if you talk about a lot of the transvestite problem or transvestite issue, the trannies, the gay rights issue, there's a lot of question of the origins of homosexuality or sexual confusion. I think most people will agree that it's derived from some sort of trauma or a family breakup, or particularly the lack of a male role model in the house.
I don't know. There's some biological factors that have been found in the brains of homosexuals and the brains of transgender people. I think there is some biological basis for it.
But I think the increase, obviously, they've always existed. People, these now arguing these. We don't.
The way that there's like this study where. You can how did homosexuals find each other before it was legal, right? And it's little signs where they would. So gay men are more likely to take a resting position where their thumb is touching the inner part of their hand.
Really?
Straight men keep their fingers apart. Yeah, there's little nuanced things like that definitely handshake. Speak. Sure, but it's such a natural thing, and. Being gay is part of a mating strategy too. That's been argued. There's like gay lions, but once in a while they'll go it's a survival tactic against the alpha males, so they don't get killed off. They don't hold a threat to the females, right? Because they're homos.
Yeah.
But then they'll go and they'll copulate with a female when they have a safe chance to in the bush, which is true for gays throughout history. Gay people got married and had kids, and they loved their wives. Sexual preference isn't necessarily a barrier to loving a woman. And I think Milo talks about this, how there's a high IQ amongst homosexuals. And throughout history, if you believe, there's a lot of very famous gay intellectuals, and it's quite an astounding number comparatively.
I would say same with creativity and art, probably too.
Right.
Yeah.
But even in the sciences and, I would say probably in the arts and music more so.
Yeah.
But it's high intellectuals. And you could argue that if gays are promoted to just, be themselves and all of this bullshit, which isn't really themselves, like acting like a caricature of a woman isn't really being gay, is it? I never got that. But they're not breeding anymore. They're not passing on their genes. And if their genes, harbor high IQ, that's too bad. That sucks.
but I'm saying what's suggested in that Planned Parenthood meeting is that you could actually promote it by changing societal conditions, by promoting family breakup.
Yeah. I'm not going to. I think a lot of teenagers, and I've had friends of mine who thought they were gay because it's so normal, but it's also still special,
Mm-hmm.
And then they grow up and, they're heterosexual completely.
Or you have a kid who's 12 or 13 and I don't know, he's not sure of himself, and all of a sudden his teacher gets wind of this and then subjects him to a psychologist who promotes it. When it could be. And this is happening because it's being actively promoted. This happens in schools,
and everything else. Like there's a thing that used to exist called dandyism, being a dandy.
Yeah.
And that's being, flamboyant and extravagant and narcissistic and loving clothes. That doesn't mean you're gay.
Yeah.
It means you're a dandy. That doesn't mean you have to have sex with men all of a sudden. Like that's just like farther off the masculine spectrum in a way, which is fine.
But there's one
thing. You don't have to promote a pathology around it.
But if you do promote things like sexualization of children, is what the sex education does. This is what age education did. You will increase and you promote things like family breakup, where there isn't a parent. There's a single parent home, where it increases the chance of sexual abuse among broken homes.
So significantly. It's just crazy.
So that trauma will produce. If you increase the incidence of that trauma in a society, you will have more people suffering sexual confusion, other psychological problems.
Yeah, I think the abuse is a key factor there.
But what I'm suggesting is that this is an example of intentional weaponization, meaning that they wanted to. If you've planned
sex is a weapon. Whoa!
So you can really get a society that way, and you ultimately change it. Which means that there's a high at some level within those people who control the education institutions, the foundations, or governmental institutions. There's malfeasance at a high level.
Right. Well, this is why communities like the Mormons and the Mennonites and the Amish, they're so separatists. They don't want to mingle with the rest of our perverse society.
Yeah. And this is also the assault on community, because within any community, because within a defined community of similar values, of backgrounds, of religion, there's accountability. You obviously in the anonymity of the big city, you can indulge a lot of vices, whereas in a smaller community you cannot. In a neighborhood you cannot. When you break up this community and you create something like suburbia, with the interstate highway system, with FHA, the 30-year mortgage, and you break up extended families.
I don't know what a community is. I really don't.
Yeah.
I'm subject to all of this, and we've replaced community with Facebook, and there's no accountability online, really. It's just crazy that people think you can build a community online. It's just a farce. I mean, you can talk to people and email people, but you're not going to ever be held accountable by anybody through your actions or through their actions. And I don't know what it's like to grow up in a community. Since I moved away from Russia, from where my grandma lived, there's no sense of even people gathering around together or playing, or the kids playing together or anything.
Well, that's what. Are you familiar with Catherine Austin Fitz?
No.
She was a former HUD subsecretary, assistant secretary of housing and urban development here in the United States. And she uncovered massive fraud. We're talking tens of billions of dollars of mortgage fraud, which connected it to the intelligence agencies, the drug trade, and what she calls the black budget, and all types of secret operations going on. But anyway, she talks about this thing called the Popsicle Index. And basically, it's the idea. This is how talk about perverse incentives and perverse economics. How she charts the decline of quality of life in America to the New York Stock Exchange growth. How there's been an inverse relationship as stock value has gone up, the quality of life in small town America has gone down in neighborhoods.
That's interesting.
And I think she ultimately connects it to the drug trade, and how the drug trade has been so integrated into the U.S. economy with the help and assistance of the intelligence agencies, because it's the narco dollars which backs up the banking system, and Wall Street props it up. You could argue that the narco dollar is as important as the petrodollar in maintaining the global economic system right now. And this is why when local communities try to get drugs out of their community, as she phrases it, not only do they find that they're going against Tony Soprano, they ultimately have to fight James Bond too, meaning the intelligence agencies, because the distribution of drugs in the community, the money has to go somewhere. Here's how it works. Let's say you're a local drug dealer. You're making $100,000 a year, having having kids sell your drugs on the street corner, whether it's meth or crack or whatever. What do you do with the cash? You don't stuff it in your pillow at night, under your bed. You have to put it somewhere. What do? You invest it in the local in a chain of KFCs or McDonald's or Wendy's or Howard Johnson's
you wash it.
You wash it. This with the earnings to share ratio 10-1. $100,000 being funneled through a local McDonald's means $1 million for the corporation that owns the McDonald's.
Right.
And most of Americans are invested through their 401k in these corporations that are publicly traded. So what most Americans don't realize is they are investing in the importation and use of drugs, the narcotics industry, which are in the process of rotting out communities. Ultimately, it's an anti-growth, non-equity investment.
Yeah, and you need young people to have zero belief system, zero confidence, and zero hope for any kind of plausible future for themselves to do the drugs.
Which sells the drugs, yeah.
Sure. And we think we need these officers coming into the classrooms, DARE programs saying drugs are bad. Everybody knows drugs are bad. Kids aren't dumb. Kids just don't care. That's the problem.
And some people have accused DARE of being a reverse psychology promotion program.
Yeah.
And a good example.
I remember DARE coming in, and I was like picking out the drugs I'd want to try when I'm older.
There you go.
For real.
I was never subjected to that. Like I said, I got a couple of decades.
I didn't even know those drugs existed, and they introduce you to it, and it's nuts. It doesn't help.
It's like in the 80s, when they were in the 90s, when they were talking about crack cocaine, and the news reports would be, it's cheap and it's 3 times as powerful. In the news reports, we talking.
Yeah,
that's a commercial.
No, it's crazy. Yeah, because like if you're a kid, well, what do your parents teach you when you're little, right? Don't put that in your mouth. Don't eat anything you don't know about. Ask me first, right? You grow up with that. You don't eat the berry. The berry might be poisonous. Mm-hmm. You think a kid who's never heard about drugs is gonna like be pressured into snorting a white powder up their nose or smoking a crack pipe? I don't know what that is. No thanks. Mm-hmm. Except we get exposed to it and it's normalized.
Mm-hmm. And another, to back this up is what Gary Webb, the reporter for the San Jose Mercury News, uncovered, who, conveniently committed suicide, shot himself twice in the head. He was so determined to kill himself. But when he exposed the crack cocaine connection to the Contras and the CIA in South Central LA, and that movie Shoot the Messenger was made about him, and he uncovered that what happened was they were importing cocaine. A lot of it coming through Mena, Arkansas, in a deal worked out with the Clintons and the Bushes. Wow. To ship the cocaine into the cities. In this case, it was South Central LA. It was coming in cheap because basically the CIA could fly it in and get around customs and drug enforcement. And it was worked out with a deal with this guy named Daniel Blandon, who was a CIA asset or a CIA agent who was working with Freeway Ricky Ross, who was using the cheap cocaine to create crack cocaine. The proceeds were then laundered through things like Death Row Records, this rap company label which promoted the drug culture. It's a marketing thing.
Sure.
So it's that bad.
Well, yeah, it's like they're selling themselves back into slavery. It's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
It's crazy.
So, I mean, I'm sorry, I didn't want to get you depressed, but
Well, we should end on a more positive note.
yeah. So, again, what would put us on a more positive note? The fact that Trump's president, or is going to be president?
We'll see about that. But I mean, I'm not gonna take a moral high ground and deny that seeing all these college kids crying and coloring and playing with Play-Doh isn't making me giddy.
Well, that's probably a Soros operation. You don't have 30 different protests occurring in So
I don't know. I don't know. I think these people are actually deeply upset. I do believe that. I mean, I think there's enough of them to be that outraged, and it'll blow over. I think that's no. I don't think that's planned or anything. I think people are having a real emotional revulsion to the outcome of the election, and good. This is your wake up call. Hopefully, I mean, I was tweeting before Trump won. The best thing for the alt-right would be if Trump loses, because they will double down and they will keep pushing. Trump won, so it's vindicated them, and maybe it'll placate the alt-right as well, because now we're on the winning side and we're not going to keep working. I'm not saying we're, as I am part of them, but yeah. I would lean towards in this kind of atmosphere. I definitely lean towards the alt-right, away from the left. Right. This is the kind of environment they've created, that I'm leaning towards them just to get away from the left. It's bad.
I mean, it's a diverse group. Diversity is their strength, ironically.
Yeah, no, I know, it's amazing.
But so, I mean, it's in many ways that they have some. The alt-right it's a healthy reaction, or it's an understandable reaction, rather. And they have some legitimate gripes and some points to be made. I mean, when you talk about this, like white genocide, well, there has been an active campaign to gleefully anticipate the erasure of the so-called white race.
Yes, and it's an acceptable conversation. It's an acceptable joke. And it's kind of, I mean, I don't want to police comedy, but like, it has to be even. Like, we should be able to joke about all kinds of genocide if that's appropriate, not just one kind of genocide. It's just, it's a double standard. Or don't joke about it at all. I mean, but you get this all the time. People, this is a narrative that some people truly believe, and a lot of white men believe this. Oh yes, I have victimized my black brothers. No, you haven't. But you just moved out of your parents' house. Like, when have you victimized anybody? What are you talking about?
Here's a good example of how this really works. Is sort of this why I think it's weaponized demography, or weaponized migration. It is historically it's been a weapon, to undermine a society or target a particular country or community with weaponized migration. It's occurred here in the United States in many ways. The Great Migration North was way to break up the ethnic neighborhoods and change the politics and demographics of the country. It was planned out. But a good example of this is I heard an account in Vermont. There was a sort of a bucolic, typically Vermont small city, small town, that recently had to take in 500 Syrian refugees, courtesy of the federal government, okay, without any consultation or permission of the people who live there. Okay, these people live there for a particular reason. They like the way it is. Okay, so you send in 500 refugees. All of a sudden, you change the demographics. You change that environment. These people have a gripe, and the mayor voiced concern with this and was immediately condemned as being racist by the feds. The people piping in there, sending these people, their communities aren't being disrupted.
Oh yeah, no, these people, this is the irony. They are all well-to-do, white, upper middle class, Ivy Leaguers, right? They've never even seen a poor black person, let alone a refugee. They don't know they don't know anything. And it's just mind-boggling, because there is real cost. There is real cost. Germany, these people are coming in, they're trying to integrate them, and they're raping little boys. They're raping little girls. They're raping adult women. they're not integrating. You can't integrate someone immediately. It will take generations, especially when they come from such a backwards culture. And this is the culture that actually has like the community and like the religious kind of ties, and their morality is completely different to the rest of the world, but it's strong. So we're bringing a culture that is so unified in its belief system into a culture that doesn't really care, and they will dominate. The unified culture will dominate.
Well, that's what happened with Europe. Europe's been, I think, well, it's been softened up over several decades. The world wars, the post-war, particularly Germany, was subject to very harsh psychological warfare, courtesy of the occupying powers, the guilt that Germany felt and all that stuff. But you see that happening also in Ukraine with its destruction of the traditional culture, with the imposition of the Western influence. It's not about democracy and human rights and open government and freedom. It becomes abortion, it becomes gay rights, it becomes transgenderism. And this assaults the culture, and you're seeing that in Ukraine. You see that in Russia, and it's the worst that the Western liberalism has to offer, not the best. That's so dismaying, at least from my perspective. It's not the good of the West; it's the worst of the West applied. And you're seeing a natural reaction. And reaction is Putinism in Russia. The reaction in the country is Trumpism in the United States. I know that's a invidious comparison.
Yeah, and I mean the fascists are rising back up in Germany. What do you want? What do you think is going to happen? The Eastern European countries are close. They're not bringing any refugees in. They're looking at what's happening, and they're becoming more and more right wing.
That's right. And remember, the Nazi period was a reaction to the Great Inflation in Weimar Germany.
Sure, people think, all these people were brainwashed. No, people had some resentment and some sentiments that just needed a little push. They just needed a little push in the direction that was favorable to the new rise in power, and that's what happened. And it's quite easy to radicalize people when they already are harboring resentment towards a specific group or specific way that their life has been disrupted. Mm-hmm. It's not a vacuum. Like these leftists think everything is a vacuum. Like people just decide to feel a certain way all of a sudden. No, not everyone's like you. People are invested in their culture and their heritage and their lifestyle. And if you disrupt that without an actual reason, people are not going to be happy. If I was the mother of a kid who got raped in a pool by a refugee, I mean, like I can't even imagine that. But like some kind of action is going to be taken by me, even if it has to be in the form of a vote for a fascist dictator. Like that's where it pushes people. It's very dangerous, and they're asking for it.
I think that's the dialectic that's being planned out here. They want to make Europe into some sort of a gladiatorial pit, and that's the reaction. And then James Corbett has theorized that this is an attempt to, by breaking down the ethno-nation state of Europe, German, French, Italian, by breaking these down, which they've done over several decades, through depopulation, demoralization, these things, the creation of the EU, these things, and you're shipping in these migrants to destabilize these areas, you encourage the idea of the European identity. And so some sort of weird way, this is to instill a sense of a European-wide identity.
Because you're bringing them into your culture.
Yes.
Like everyone, like Europe is, there's no like us versus them that much anymore. There's like the soccer teams and the little villages, blah, blah, blah. But then you take someone from a completely different part of the world who thinks nothing like you, because humans are not all the same and we're not all kumbaya. We have very different roots. And you see a very literal us versus them, and you buckle down. And it comes back to tribalism. It always will come back to tribalism, because you can't undo millions of years of evolution. You can't. And this happened, when we had the Homo sapiens, then the Homo sapiens came up from Africa into Europe and the Middle East. And they came and found these people that were more intelligent and more evolved in certain aspects of their intellect, called the Neanderthals. And, that was okay for a little while, and there was some interbreeding. And then all of the sudden, the Neanderthals were wiped out. I wonder what happened. This is very structure of our very DNA, us versus them, is not going to end well. And that's the narrative that's been sold to us. The way we need to live is to be allowed to be separate and encourage coexistence through a high standard of living. That's the only way to do it. You can't shove it down everyone's throats that there's no differences between us because they're so self-apparent. It's ludicrous that's even a concept.
Well, the irony is the name of diversity. Everyone has to be the same. That's the globalist message. You have to do away with ethnic differences and language and these things, and that's not the way it works. It's, obviously, good fences make good friends, right? As the poet wrote.
Sure, yeah.
And you need community.
A gun society makes a polite society.
Yeah, exactly. No, yeah, exactly.
Sure, sure.
So that's about, but they're trying to destroy that because I think when you talked about they don't want a high standard of living because they want a feudalistic society. They want a very rich and very poor. And I think ultimately that's what they're working towards. And hopefully there's an element, gets back to your original discussion, how we'll close it out. Maybe the fact that a certain faction backed Trump, that he was allowed to proceed and get elected, it represents a certain faction within that elite who think, wait a second, we don't want to go this route. This is too much.
Yeah, maybe. I hope so. I don't know how sold I am, but I mean, something's working here. Something is working, whether it's just the people, whether there's some higher ups that support him. I mean, Peter Thiel came out for him. He was the only Silicon Valley person that came out for him, and he's in a good position now. Good job, Peter.
Yeah, he's a Bilderberger. So
he mingled. I really did a flip and reversal on him because I think he's the kind of guy who's like, dude, of course I'm going to go to the Bilderberger. I'm going to go see what they're doing there. I'm going to be more informed. That doesn't make him inherently a bad actor. So I'm in the gray area with him again. Like I didn't really like him before, but I think through his actions and the kind of narrative he is promoting, I do tend to favor him these days.
Yeah, well, I think, like I said, I'm only saying this because you wanted to end it on a positive note.
Sure,
So,
yeah.
And that's what I'm doing. I'm thinking, that was kind of a very, when I heard that interpretation of the election and Trump, I said, well, maybe they're not all insane.
Maybe the Bilderberg group will end up, helping, the West.
Yeah,
like, we went a little far.
Yeah, exactly. And the mistake is we look at these people as monolithic, and they're not. They're people.
They have families. I mean, they're rich and connected, but that doesn't automatically make them, completely sociopathic. Or I'm sure some of them care about which direction things go. They have to exist in this world too.
Yes. Yeah. So maybe it's like a younger faction is overtaking the David Rockefeller generation.
Maybe. Dude, it's very interesting. Our interesting times indeed.
Yes, thank you. Well, Julie, I want to.
Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, thank you for coming back on the show, of course, and it's a great talk. It's kind of like how I wanted to go the conversation, kind of go many different places with it. So thanks a lot. And again, your website is Brave the World?
BraveTheWorld.com. And you can find me on YouTube if you just type that in, Brave the World, and check out my videos. Throw them on while you're doing, housework or something. There's a lot of information. You might need to listen to it more than once, but I think it's worthwhile, and I think it's quite different than a lot of the other content online.
Excellent. And of course, you are listener and viewer supported, so they can go to Patreon and or PayPal.
Sure, yeah, and Bitcoin. So you can find. If you wanna throw me a bone, I have many ways to do so, and it's all on my website on the right hand side bar. Okay, bravetheworld.com.
Well, thank you. And I'll wish you a Canadian Thanksgiving. Right? They're like a week later, I think, than us. Is that the story?
Yeah, we hardly. God, my parents and I, we don't celebrate any. No, it's earlier. It's not later. It's
earlier. Okay.
It's a month earlier. Yeah. So we already went. We already did it. What did we make? We made goose, I believe. Yeah.
Goose.
And time goes by. When you have a kid, time goes by so fast. I can't remember what we did last week.
Well, listen. Well, thank you. And good luck with the little one as he learns to walk. And get around.
God, to my horror.
So listen, great. Well, listen, thanks a lot. It was great. I love talking to you. Your stuff is great. Very insightful. It's a breath of fresh air, I think.
Sure, and I learn so much every time I talk to you as well. It's really
thank you. Thank you, and I'll let you go, tend to your little one, and salvage some of your
I
weekend.
can hear it. Okay, take care. Bye bye.
And bye bye.